Hello, English 242 students. Dr. Mills here with you to discuss Module 5. Module 5 begins on Monday, the 15th of September, and runs through Sunday, the 21st. The instructions for this module are to read Sign of the Times, an excerpt from pages 88 to 97 by Thomas Carlyle, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's The Cry of the Children, pages 169 to 172, and then read the biographical information on Carlyle and the biographical information on Barrett as well. You, of course, have the video lecture you're watching now and your context readings. The additional resources I've included below are some YouTube videos on Carlyle and Browning. And then the assignments for this week, of course, are the lecture quiz, the discussion board post Wednesday night, is the deadline before the post, and the 2 replies before Sunday night. You, of course, have your 150-word reflection and the semester-long notes portfolio journal assignment that you've been creating the whole semester. The context for this week's lecture is here. Below that, you'll see the quiz, the discussion board, the reflection assignments, and of course, the 2 YouTube links for your assignment. So those are the assignments for this week. I'm going to now deliver the lecture for you so you can prepare for, of course, the quiz this week. This week, we're talking about the early Victorian period. I'm calling this Doubt, Duty, and Dramatic Monologue. So by the 1830s and the 1840s, Britain was kind of in the middle of a huge social and economic change. The Industrial Revolution had created factories and railroads and mass production, but it also created things like slums and poverty and, worse, child labor. Writers of the time weren't content to just simply admire progress. They asked, at what cost is this progress? Literature became one way to hold up a mirror to society after that. Two very different voices this week, Thomas Carlyle and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, show us how Victorians wrestled with doubt, duty, and social conscience. Carlyle is like the stern prophet who was warning about the spiritual dangers of a mechanical age. And Browning is the passionate poet putting the voices of suffering children front and center. Thomas Carlyle was a prophet of the mechanical age, was born in 1795 and lived until 1881. He was a Scottish writer, an essayist, and also a historian. He wasn't a poet, but his writings shaped the way many Victorians thought about industry, morality, and progress. His prose style is dense, it's fiery, and it's full of biblical rhythms. It reads almost like a sermon does. Carlyle looked at the Industrial Revolution and saw more than steam engines and spinning machines. He believed that the mechanical age was changing not only factories, but also how people thought and how they lived. To him, life was becoming too focused on efficiency, on numbers, and, of course, utility. As far as Carlyle's Sign of the Times, you're reading an excerpt of it. In this essay, Carlyle argues that society is in danger of losing its soul. Machines and mechanism dominate everything from politics and religion to education and even friendship. Human beings, he warns, risk becoming more cogs in a giant industrial system. You're just a part of a machine. He criticizes utilitarianism, the idea that actions should be judged by how much happiness they produce. For Carlyle, that philosophy was too cold and too calculating. He insists that people need inner conviction, moral, spiritual, and imaginative depth, not just mechanical systems to run by. His call is clear. Progress must be more than material. It must include justice. It must include character. It must include faith. Think of Carlyle as a warning voice. He's saying, if you build a society only on machines and money, you'll create a world efficient on the surface, but one that's empty at its core. In contrast, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, the poet of protest, was born in 1806 and died in the year 1861. Elizabeth Barrett Browning was one of the most famous poets of her day, admired on both sides of the Atlantic in America and in Great Britain. While she is often remembered for her love poetry, like "How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways," she was also a fierce social critic. Her works tackled slavery, women's rights, and child labor. She was born into a wealthy family and was well educated and began writing very young. She struggled with illness throughout her life, but her mind and her voice were very powerful. Her marriage to fellow poet Robert Browning, that's right, you may have heard of him before, became one of the great literary love stories of the age. For this course, we're covering Browning's The Cry of the Children. This poem is one of the strongest protests against child labor in the Victorian era. It was written in 1843 and it responded to shocking government reports, about children working in coal mines and in factories. The poem opens by contrasting the joy of healthy children with the misery of factory children who are weary long before their time. Browning lets the children speak. They describe their exhaustion, they describe their lack of hope, and their wish for death as an escape from this hell. She points out society's hypocrisy. Adults pray in church while ignoring the suffering of their children. And the ending is heartbreaking. The children say they would rather be dead than to live in these conditions. Browning's goal here was not subtle. She wanted readers to feel the outrage she felt. Her simple and emotional language made sure no one could miss the point of the poem. Some themes that are shared here between these two artists, though Carlyle and Browning write in very different styles, they overlap in powerful ways. Industrial critique, both of them question whether progress really benefits anyone. Carlyle philosophizes while Browning personalizes. They both argue that society must care for its weakest members. They have this moral responsibility about them. And also they deal with religion and hypocrisy. Carlyle critiques shallow morality, and Browning calls out those who pray while ignoring suffering. Why it matters. The reading this week reminds us that Victorian literature was not just about fancy manners and moral lessons. It was about facing the hardest questions of modern life. Carlyle and Browning want their readers to look directly at suffering and ask, what is our duty? What kind of progress is worth having? For us today, these questions still resonate. How do we balance technology and humanity? And how do we make sure our progress does not leave the most vulnerable behind? Give me 1 second and I will give you the password for your quiz this week. The password for this week's lecture quiz is Carlyle. Thomas Carlyle's last name, Carlyle, no capitals. Good luck. Thank you.